It's called the Deadpool. And it's not metaphorical. When Lake Mead drops below 895 feet above sea level, the water falls below the lowest intake tower at Hoover Dam. No intake, no flow, no water for Las Vegas, Phoenix, San Diego, Los Angeles, and 35 million people across 7 states. The water simply stops. And Las Vegas just approved spending $1.4 billion to build an emergency tunnel through solid bedrock underwater just to buy time. But here's what they didn't tell you. That Deadpool is arriving faster than anyone predicted. And when it does, it doesn't just affect one city. It threatens the entire Southwest. You're watching megaquakes. Picture this. You're standing on the observation deck of Hoover Dam in 1935, the year they finished it. The Colorado River stretches behind you into a massive lake, Lake Mead. The water is so high, so vast, that it looks like an inland ocean. 94 cubic kilometers of water. That's enough to bury the entire state of Rhode Island under 33 feet of water. The engineers who built this dam thought they were creating a permanent solution. A century's worth of water storage. A buffer against drought. A guarantee that no matter what happened in the Colorado River Basin, Las Vegas and the Southwest would have reliable water. They were wrong. Today, Lake Mead looks like a different planet. Where the water once rose 532 feet high, it's now 100 feet lower. The shoreline has receded so far that entire marinas are sitting on exposed dry land. Boats that once floated on water are now rusting on bedrock 300 feet away from the water's edge. The rings on the canyon walls, white and gray striations left behind by decades of high water, look like a bathtub ring. Except this bathtub hasn't been full in 20 years. And this is the problem. 40 million people across 7 states, California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, depend on water from the Colorado River. Not sometimes, not mostly, completely. The water that flows through Hoover Dam is the only reason Las Vegas exists. It's the only reason Phoenix can support 1.5 million people in the middle of the desert. It's why farmers in California's Central Valley can grow food that feeds America. This isn't a backup system. This is the system. But the water keeps dropping. And the engineers know exactly when the crisis arrives. When you look at Hoover Dam, you see 2 main intake towers. They're called the Arizona intake and the Nevada intake. They sit at 1,050 feet elevation. They're like 2 straws stuck in a glass of water. As long as the water level stays above those straws, gravity can pull water down through the dam and into the turbines that generate power, and into the penstocks that carry water to everyone downstream. But Lake Mead isn't staying above those straws anymore. The Deadpool threshold, 895 feet elevation, is the lowest point water can physically reach before it falls below both intakes. Below that level, there's no gravity-fed flow. The water's trapped. And 895 feet isn't some theoretical number scientists dreamed up in a computer model. It's the level where the math becomes real, where 40 million people start having a serious problem. Engineers call this a dead pool because nothing in the water moves anymore. No circulation, no flow, just stagnant, trapped water. Sitting at the bottom of Lake Mead like a puddle, nobody wants to step in. The Deadpool doesn't just affect Las Vegas, it affects the entire Southwest. But Las Vegas isn't waiting passively, they're building their way out. In 2010, the Southern Nevada Water Authority made a decision. They commissioned a massive engineering project. They called it the Third Straw. For $817 million, they would drill a tunnel, not from the shore into the water like the existing intakes, but from a location that would allow them to pull water even if Lake Mead dropped below 895 feet. They would drill down through bedrock to a lower elevation. They would create a backstop, a last resort, an emergency system. But here's what makes this project fascinating. It isn't finished, not completely. And the timeline for when it needs to be finished keeps getting shorter. Building a tunnel through rock underwater while the lake is still above you is like performing heart surgery on a patient who's still standing and walking around. You have to do the work while the system is still operating. You can't shut down Hoover Dam. You can't drain Lake Mead. You have to bore the tunnel while 40 million people are still using the water system. The engineers started at a place called the Third Intake Facility on the Nevada side. They began drilling. Not with a tunnel boring machine like you might imagine. Those machines are enormous, and you need a finished tunnel to pull them out of. Instead, they used smaller rotary drills and traditional hard rock drilling techniques. They went down. They went deep. They went through layers of Hoiween limestone and dolomite. They had to navigate around existing infrastructure, power lines, past water quality monitoring equipment, all while maintaining the system. The tunnel itself is about 7 miles long. That's about the distance from downtown Las Vegas to the airport. Picture drilling a tunnel from your house to the airport while someone else is actively living in your house. The construction took years. The costs climbed. There were delays. There were technical challenges nobody anticipated. The engineers had to use specialized equipment to prevent cave-ins while drilling through unstable sections of rock. They had to manage water infiltration constantly. The irony of drilling through solid rock to access water while dealing with water leaks from Lake Mead pressing down on them. They had to ensure the tunnel lining was reinforced enough to withstand decades of pressurized flow. And they had to maintain absolute precision because a miscalibration of even a few feet meant the tunnel would miss its target location entirely. By 2022, the tunnel was complete. They could access water at an elevation of 860 feet, below the Deadpool threshold. The tunnel can theoretically draw water when Lake Mead drops to levels that would have made the system useless just a decade ago. It's a triumph of engineering. It's also a monument to desperation. Las Vegas spent $817 million drilling through bedrock because the alternative, running out of water, was unthinkable. Except there's a problem with that logic. The Deadpool, at 895 feet, assumes the water level stays roughly stable at that point. But water doesn't work that way. If Lake Mead drops to 895 feet, and the system is pulling water out through the third straw at 860 feet, the water will continue dropping. The system removes water faster than rainfall, and snowmelt can replace it. The new intake doesn't create new water. It just lets you access existing water from lower down. So 860 feet might not be low enough. And when you're dealing with a system that services 40 million people, might not be low enough is unacceptable. Eventually, even that third straw could suck air. And then what? If that just blew your mind, every subscriber is automatically entered in our monthly giveaway for a branded hoodie. Details in the description. The real question is this: how fast is Lake Mead actually dropping? Climate scientists built models. They predicted drought. They said the Colorado River would decline by certain percentages. They said Lake Mead would drop by certain inches per year. They created projections based on climate trends, precipitation data, river flow history, and computer models of future weather patterns. Then reality showed up and didn't read the memo. Lake Mead isn't dropping at the predicted rate. It's dropping faster. In the last decade alone, the water level has fallen over 100 feet, nearly double the rate that models predicted 2 decades ago. The Colorado River itself is shrinking. The amount of water flowing through it year after year is less than the amount it was supposed to carry. This is happening for multiple reasons. The snowpack in the Rocky Mountains that feeds the river is melting earlier in spring. Hotter temperatures are evaporating more water before it ever reaches the river. Irrigation and municipal use upstream is extracting more water. And the fundamental climate pattern is drier. The megadrought, that's what scientists call the current crisis in the Southwest, is now more than 2 decades old. It's the driest 20-year stretch in the region in 1,200 years, not just since Europeans arrived, not just since America was founded, not just since the Colorado River Compact was signed. 1,200 years. Think about that. The entire history of the United States is 250 years. The megadrought is longer than 1,200 years of recorded tree data. The trees around Lake Mead record this in their rings. Scientists can read the history of water levels in the annual growth patterns of dead juniper and ponderosa pine. Each ring represents a year. Wide rings mean wet years with strong growth. Narrow rings mean dry years with minimal growth. Scientists can see when the Southwest had wet years and dry years going back more than 1,000 years. They can reconstruct the climate history using nothing but dead trees and dendrochronology, the science of reading tree rings. And they can see that nothing in that 1,000-year record looks like what's happening right now. The current drought is off the charts. It's beyond the normal variation. It's a pattern the region hasn't experienced in at least 1,000 years. Lake Mead has dropped from 1,145 feet elevation at full capacity to 1,040 feet in March 2026. That's 105 feet of loss in less than a decade. At that rate of drop, the water level reaches 895 feet, the Deadpool threshold, in less than 10 years, possibly sooner. Some projections say it could happen within 5 to 7 years if the drought intensifies. Las Vegas knows this. That's why they're taking an unusual step. Most American cities don't prepare for water shortages until the water actually becomes short. Las Vegas did something different. They decided to become the most water-efficient major city in the entire United States. And they actually succeeded. When you think about Las Vegas, you probably imagine swimming pools and fountains and excess. The image of the city is all about water. Fountains at the Bellagio shooting hundreds of gallons into the air nightly. The canals at the Venetian filled with gondolas. The moats around medieval-themed casinos. The lakes at the hotel casinos. But here's a secret. You're not seeing the whole picture. Behind the scenes, Las Vegas has spent the last 2 decades systematically removing lawns from residential properties. They've offered rebates to homeowners who rip out thirsty desert landscaping and replace it with xeriscaping, native plants that thrive on minimal water. They've installed drip irrigation systems that put water exactly where plants need it, eliminating waste. They've rebuilt their indoor water recycling system to recover and reuse 99% of indoor water. Sinks, showers, toilets, all of it gets reclaimed and cycled back through the system. Even wastewater gets processed and returned to the Colorado River system. The result is remarkable. Today, Las Vegas uses less water per capita than any other major metropolitan area in the United States. Not less than other desert cities. Less than New York. Less than San Francisco. Less than Los Angeles. That's remarkable for a city built in a desert where the average annual rainfall is 4 inches. 4 inches. Some American cities get that much rain in a single week. Las Vegas gets 4 inches a year and somehow manages to support 2.2 million people in the metropolitan area while using less water per person than cities that get 3 times more rain. But even that isn't enough. Because here's the math that keeps Las Vegas water officials awake at night. The Colorado River Compact, the 1922 agreement that divided Colorado River water among the 7 states, allocated 300,000 acre-feet per year to Nevada. That's the amount of water supposed to flow to Las Vegas and the rest of Nevada every single year. But the entire Colorado River system is now delivering less water than the compact promised. The actual flow is 200,000 acre-feet per year on average, down from 300,000. The river is underperforming. This means there are mandatory cuts. Arizona is cutting its water usage. California is cutting its water usage. Nevada has already cut more than anyone else. And Las Vegas, which uses about 300,000 acre-feet per year for its population and agriculture, is facing a reality. There's simply less water than there are people and farms that need it. The third straw helps, but it's not a solution. It's a delay mechanism. It buys Las Vegas maybe a decade of time to figure out what comes next. Here's where the story gets truly insane. Lake Mead is only part of the crisis. There's also Lake Powell, which is created by the Glen Canyon Dam upstream on the Colorado River. Powell sits higher than Mead. It's supposed to be the first-line water storage. When Powell is full, it supplies water to the upper basin states, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. When Powell is full, Mead fills up from the overflow. But Powell isn't full. It's been dropping for years. It's now at about 24% capacity. This creates a cascade problem. There's not enough water in Powell to fill Mead. So Mead isn't getting refilled. So Mead keeps dropping. And because Lake Powell is managed by the federal government, and Lake Mead is managed by Nevada, Arizona, and California, the states argue about who gets water and how much and when. The federal government has stepped in to broker deals. They've paid some upstream farmers not to plant crops, just to leave fields dry so the water conserved can flow downstream. They've negotiated agreements to reduce consumption, but every agreement is temporary. Every drought year, the crisis gets worse. Every wet year, people get briefly hopeful. And the long-term trend is unmistakable. There's simply less water than the system was designed to handle. Scientists know why. The climate isn't just getting hotter in general. The desert Southwest is getting exponentially hotter. Temperature increases in that region are happening 50% faster than the global average. Hotter air evaporates more water from the surface of lakes and reservoirs. Hotter air also makes snow melt faster in spring and fall. It's like the water cycle is speeding up, and the system is running out of water faster than it can be replenished. So what happens when the third straw isn't enough? What happens when the Lake Mead drops to 860 feet and keeps going? Water managers don't like talking about this publicly, but they're planning for it. They're studying desalination plants, facilities that can turn ocean water or extremely salty water into fresh water. There's a proposal to build a desalination facility in California and pipeline the water across the desert to Nevada. But desalination is expensive. A modern desalination plant costs over $1 billion. It requires enormous amounts of energy. You're essentially using power to separate salt from water at a molecular level. And it can only supplement the system. It can't replace 300,000 acre-feet per year. You would need multiple desalination plants, multiple pipelines running across hundreds of miles of desert, billions more in infrastructure, and you'd still need the original water system to keep functioning while you built all of that. Water managers are also exploring agricultural water transfers. The idea is simple. Buy water from farmers, pay them not to grow crops, or pay them to switch to crops that require less water. This works in the short term. A farmer gets compensated. He doesn't irrigate his field. The water stays in the system and flows downstream. But this assumes there are always farmers willing to sell, and it assumes the compensation is economically viable. If you're paying farmers hundreds of millions of dollars per year for water rights, who's paying for that? It gets passed to cities. It gets passed to consumers. It becomes a cost that eventually becomes unsustainable. There's also the harder conversation nobody wants to have. At some point, if the water doesn't come back, the region simply can't support the current population. Las Vegas can't exist as a major city if there's no water. Phoenix can't exist as it currently does. The agricultural industry in the Central Valley can't continue. Arizona would lose irrigation for millions of acres. Nevada would have to shrink. Something has to give. And what gives determines the future of the entire Southwest. The optimistic scenario is that the megadrought breaks. A series of wet years arrives. The Colorado River starts flowing normally again. Snowpack returns to historical averages. Lake Mead refills. Everyone stops panicking. And the third straw becomes an unnecessary precaution, like a fire extinguisher you buy for peace of mind and never have to use. The pessimistic scenario is that the climate scientists are correct, and the southwestern United States is permanently drier now. The climate shift is real. It's not cyclical. It's not a temporary drought cycle. It's a regime change. The Colorado River never returns to its historical flow. Lake Mead continues dropping year after year. The Deadpool isn't a one-time crisis. It's a state the system enters and doesn't leave. It's the new normal. And the region faces fundamental transformation. Cities shrink. Agriculture gets abandoned. The economy restructures. Millions of people reckon with the reality that they can't sustain current life patterns. Las Vegas's bet is that human engineering can buy enough time for something else to happen. The climate to change course. Technology to provide alternatives. Population to voluntarily decline. Something. The third straw is that bet made physical. It's a $1.4 billion statement that says, "We refuse to accept the Deadpool without a fight. We will drill through bedrock 800 feet underwater. We will build emergency systems. We will create backups to backups. We will do whatever it takes to stay alive. We will buy time." Whether that's enough remains the darkest question in the American Southwest. The third straw might work. It might delay the crisis by a decade. It might provide the necessary time. Or it might just be an expensive pause before the inevitable. A $1.4 billion postponement of the reckoning. Either way, the question remains, what happens when the third straw runs dry? The Deadpool is coming. The math says it arrives within a decade, maybe sooner. When it does, it won't be a sudden apocalypse. It will be a slow, grinding crisis. Lake Mead will drop inch by inch. The third straw will engage. Las Vegas will cut water deeper. Restrictions will multiply. Farmers will see irrigation cut off. And the entire Southwest will enter an era unlike anything in recorded history. A period where demand for water permanently exceeds supply. That's not a disaster that happens tomorrow. It's a disaster that's happening right now, in slow motion, hidden behind engineering projects and political agreements and clever conservation. And the only thing between 40 million people and crisis is a tunnel drilled through bedrock 800 feet underwater. A tunnel that the engineers knew they might need someday. A tunnel that's running out of time. And if stories like this remind you that the unexpected can arrive without warning, grab your free disaster preparedness toolkit. The link is in the description.